Parliament mastermind Dr Fu-Manchu is examined by Professor Geoffrey Richards in Part 3 of The Radio Adventurers.
The Shadow of Fu-Manchu. Based on the series by Sax Rohmer. London at midnight. A great city wrapped in a heavy shroud of dense yellow fog. Streetlights, weird as elfin lamps, glow mistily like something fashioned in a dream. The murmur of creeping traffic is low, hushed, mysterious. Behind an ancient wall surrounding unkept lawns, a vast, gloomy old mansion crouches like an evil beast of prey. Amidst walls concealed in heavy tapestries, magnificently figured in golden dragons. The floor carpeted with rich, deep-piled Chinese rugs. At a huge dragon-leg table, covered with scintillating globes, cubes, and instruments, unknown to Western science, sits that master scientist, that prince of evil, Dr Fu-Manchu. Enveloped in a heavy yellow silk gown, he thoughtfully studies through long, narrowed eyes the glow of the green light of a fashionably gowned, exquisitely beautiful Eurasian woman who stands beyond the table, watching him fearfully. Presently, he nods slowly, leans forward, and...
You have followed my instructions, Caramel?
The message has been delivered to Sir Crichton Davy at number 5, Westbourne Road.
Good. And our friend who believes he can forestall the hand of Dr Fu-Manchu, Mr. Nayland Smith, the detective, what of him? Well?
At this moment, Master, he approaches the house of Dr. James Petrie in Baker Street.
Chinese opium dens in Limehouse, half-naked Burmese dacoits in the back streets of Wapping, beautiful slave girls with fur coats thrown hastily over scanty harem dress, mysterious drugs hitherto unknown to Western science, religious stranglers, exotic perfumes, fog. The unmistakable, unforgettable world of Dr Fu-Manchu, the sinister Oriental mastermind created by the writer Sax Rohmer. In a series of 13 novels published between 1913 and 1959, Rohmer gave us one of fiction's gallery of immortals, a name instantly recognizable and evocative of a time and a mindset. Deeply politically incorrect by today's standards, Rohmer's fictional universe and his archetypes of Oriental villainy, Dr Fu-Manchu, and Occidental heroism, Commissioner Nayland Smith, still exert the fascination of all elemental characters.
What is all the mystery, Nayland? You break into a man's room at midnight and...
Mystery enough, old chap. But first, a bit of scotch, please.
Oh, neat or soda?
Neat, if you don't mind.
Yeah. There you are.
Thank you.
Now, you're on leave, eh?
Leave? No, Petrie, no such luck. I'm on duty.
In London? You've been transferred home?
A roving commission. Here today and gone tomorrow.
Well, tell me, what's it all about?
First, let me show you something. Wait until I take off my coat. Look at my arm. Ever see a wound like that?
Not exactly. Nasty-looking arm, old chap. It's quite healed, though. A good job it got you in the fleshy part of the forearm. Appears to have been deeply cauterized.
Right. Very deeply. It had to be. An arrowhead dipped in the venom of a hamadryad went in there.
A hamadryad?
The most deadly of all eastern reptiles. There's only one treatment. A sharp blade, a match, and a broken cartridge.
Devilish strong treatment. Even then, it's touch and go. An accident?
That's the point. It was not an accident. And at this moment, I'm on the heels of the man who extracted the venom from the snake, prepared the arrow, and caused it to be shot at me.
Oh, you're joking.
Does that wound look like a joke? And that man, unless my calculations are wrong, is now in London.
And you hope to find him?
Petrie, I've traveled from Burma, not in the interests of the British government merely, but of the entire white race. And I honestly believe its survival depends largely on the success of my mission.
Well, sounds rather fantastic, old man.
If it only were fantasy. But I'm wasting time. I came to you because you're the only man I can trust. Aside from my chief, I hope you're the only one who knows I've left Burma.
How can I help you, Nayland? District practitioner is hardly
I must
likely
have
to...
someone with me all the time, someone I can absolutely trust. It's imperative. Petrie, can you spare a few days to a weird and dangerous business?
Of course. My practice doesn't confine me too closely.
Good. Then we start now.
Now? You mean tonight?
Tonight. There's one move we must make immediately. I must warn Sir Crichton Davy.
Crichton Davy? Of the Indian Bureau?
Exactly. He's a doomed man unless he follows my instructions without question, without hesitation.
The success of the books inevitably attracted the attention of Hollywood, and over the years, such cinema luminaries as Warner Oland, Boris Karloff, John Carradine, and Christopher Lee have taken on the mantle of the Devil Doctor. But Fu-Manchu and Nayland Smith also had a radio career. In Britain, from the 6th of December 1936 to the 6th of February 1938, Fu-Manchu featured in a Radio Luxembourg serial running to 62 episodes. Frank Cochrane played Fu-Manchu, and D.A. Clark Smith played Nayland Smith. This has not survived, but its American equivalent, The Shadow of Fu-Manchu, has survived, preserved on a set of elderly discs whose surface crackle give it an authentic flavour of ancient radio storytelling. Originally broadcast in New York between the 8th of May and the 1st of November 1939 in 15-minute episodes, The Shadow of Fu-Manchu was repeated the following year. The serial starred the English actor Hanley Stafford as Nayland Smith and the American actor Gail Gordon as Dr. Petrie. The actor playing Fu-Manchu, like the rest of the cast, was uncredited, as was the practice in those days. The Hollywood films and the American radio serials confirmed that Rohmer's creations were as popular in America as they were in Britain. But who exactly was Sax Rohmer? Sir Christopher Frayling, rector of the Royal College of Art, has long been fascinated by this unique writer.
Sax Rohmer's real name was Arthur Sarsfield Ward, born in the 1880s near Birmingham to Irish parents, and found it rather difficult to adjust to adult life, tried to be a banker, tried to be a civil servant, tried to be a journalist, always went wrong. Gravitated towards the music hall, where he wrote songs for George Roby and Little Titch, and was very friendly with Houdini, the escapologist. And then he changed his name to Sax Rohmer from Arthur Ward, which he thought meant freelance in Anglo-Saxon, because he was one of nature's freelancers. He marries Rose Elizabeth Knox, who is the sister of Teddy Knox of the Crazy Gang, Nervo and Knox, and they met when she was working in a juggling team with her 6 brothers. I mean, it's very, very strange, all this. And then he hits pay dirt with his first full-length novel in 1913, The Mystery of Dr. Fu-Manchu, which really combines all his interests. It's a bit music hall, it's a bit sort of carnival and pantomime. He'd been sent on a journalistic assignment in 1911 to Limehouse for Titbits, which was a sister magazine to the Strand magazine, to docket the exploits of a man called Mr. King, who was said to be the great drugs baron of Limehouse. And Rohmer found nothing. He sat there, and all he saw was lots of people going in and out of laundries and Chinese restaurants. But his imagination did the rest, and he describes extraordinary. He said, I sat there, and I imagined the exotic things that were going on behind these apparently innocent shop fronts. So their very innocence becomes sinister, because they can't be that innocent. There must be something going on behind them. So he fantasizes about Mr. King with his exotic girlfriend, who looks like an Edmund Dulac illustration from The 1001 Nights. The whiff of perfume and opium and so on. And instead of writing about Mr. King, he turns him into Fu-Manchu, and off he went. He claimed to have made $3 million out of the Fu-Manchu stories, and whenever he signed his signature on photographs, he'd put a dollar sign over the S, Sax Rohmer with dollars. None of his other books did quite as well, but Fu was the one.
Rohmer called Fu-Manchu the Yellow Peril incarnate in one man. But what was the Yellow Peril? The term originated in Germany as the title of an 1895 painting by Hermann Nachfuss, suggested by Kaiser Wilhelm II himself. It showed the Archangel Michael defending the Western races against the approach from the east of a yellow Buddha seated on a dragon in a storm cloud. The idea was taken up by the English novelist M.P. Shiel in a series of books beginning with The Yellow Danger in 1898. But it was Sax Rohmer who really transmuted the Yellow Peril into myth. A myth to which Western readers were receptive because of concerns over immigration, which had created the Chinatown areas of London, Liverpool and San Francisco, and the ever-present worries about the security of the Western empires at a time when the Boxer Uprising and later the Chinese Revolution caused people to remember with trepidation Napoleon's dictum, "Let China sleep, for when she wakes, the world will tremble."
I say, Nayland, someone took the cab behind us. I think it's following us.
I expected that. Well, if I escape alive from this business, old chap, I'll know that I lead a charmed life.
But aren't you going to try to throw them off?
Useless. Wherever we went, Fu-Manchu would find us. You no doubt still wonder why a servant of the British government, lately stationed in Burma, appears in London in the character of a detective.
Rather.
Simply because I stumbled onto a clue, quite by accident. I discovered definite evidence of the existence of Fu-Manchu.
Well, is he an emissary of an Eastern power?
I can't say definitely, but I do know that a certain Eastern power will be requested to see that Dr. Fu removes himself and his influence as far and as quickly from England as possible.
And if your Eastern state refuses?
Then, Petrie, anything may happen.
A madman. A madman with unlimited power.
He's much more. Whether a fanatic or a duly appointed agent, Fu-Manchu is undoubtedly the most malignant personality existing in the world today. He's a fluent linguist, both in civilized and barbaric languages. He's an adept in all the arts and sciences a great university could teach him, and many black arts that no university could possibly teach him. He has the brains of any three men of genius.
But what is his object?
His object? Why did René Corot fall dead in a Paris opera house?
Oh, heart failure, wasn't it?
He died because his last speech had shown that he held the key to the secret of Tonkin. And what became of the Grand Duke Stanislaus? Do you remember?
For suicide, as I recall it.
He alone was fully aware of Russia's growing peril. He alone knew the truth about Mongolia. That knowledge caused his death.
But Sir Crichton Davy.
He was the only living Englishman who understood the vast importance of the Tibetan frontiers.
I'm beginning to see, Nayland.
Yes, it was their knowledge of the East that doomed them. When any great leader dares to arouse the West to a sense of the awakening of the East, he's destroyed.
Incredible. You mean to say that Fu-Manchu controls this terrible secret movement?
Exactly, Petrie. Fu-Manchu and none other.
What were Rohmer's qualities as a storyteller?
Well, Sax Rohmer is an extremely odd writer. In a way, he's the heir to the tradition of the Victorian penny dreadful, that all his books, or virtually all his books, started as serials. They have a very dramatic opening. They have a rather exotic sort of middle section and finish with a bang, so it's a real page-turner. And they have that kind of serial quality that fitted them very well, both for radio and the movie serials. So there's a sort of blood and thunder aspect. He's not very good at characterization and tends to make up for that with lots of incident and colour and strange ways of speaking. He overwrites like mad. They're not detective stories. There's no puzzle element, because I don't think Sax Rohmer was subtle enough for that. But he really lays on the formula. And the formula is usually eminent person is kidnapped in the first chapter, usually an archaeologist or someone who knows, the man who knew too much. You know. Dr. Petrie and Nayland Smith go on the hunt. It takes them to an opium den. They bump into Fu-Manchu or one of his agents. There's an elaborate machine of torture, which is seldom used, but it's described in great detail, usually taking a whole chapter, called something like the Zayat Kiss.
Inspector Smith, perhaps you'd like to question Sir Crichton's secretary. This is he, Mr. Burgoyne.
Oh, thank you, Weymouth. I understand, Mr. Burgoyne, Sir Crichton was taken seriously ill in this library.
At 11:30. I was working here, he in the little study there.
I see the connecting door is closed. It was closed then?
It was. Always is. It was open, however, about 11:25 for a moment when a message came for Sir Crichton.
Message? What was it?
I couldn't say. It was brought by a district messenger. I placed it at Sir Crichton's elbow on the desk.
Yes, and then?
5 minutes later, Sir Crichton burst open the door and staggered in here with a strangled scream. He fell to the floor, and as I lifted him and carried him to the couch, he gasped something that sounded like the Red Hand. Before I could reach bell or telephone, he was dead.
The red hand. You believe he referred to this red mark on his arm?
No, sir. I do not.
The red hand. The red hand. I wonder. Could it? Great Scott. The Zayat kiss. The study, Burgoyne. Have you been in there since Sir Crichton died?
Why, yes. For a glance round only. That is, I stood in the door.
You didn't go inside?
Why, no.
Windows, other doors, everything. Closed or open, did you notice?
It closed, sir, tightly. I came out again immediately.
Fortunate for you, old man, that you're not at this moment lying there beside Sir Crichton. By Jove! What's that? Petrie, Weymouth, come with me. You others stay clear. The instant we're inside that study, Burgoyne, close the door. Petrie, at the least sign of movement, on the furniture, floor, anywhere, shoot and shoot quick. Come. Careful, gentlemen. Don't touch anything on your life. That wailing. What in the name of Petrie, stand still. There it is. Don't move.
There's a clash of civilizations. Fu shows his capabilities as a super scientist, and in the last reel, at least in the early books, Fu-Manchu dies to all intents and purposes. He's shot, he falls into the channel. In the first book, he burns alive while screaming, "I am the Lord of the Fires." And then he resurrects magically. Like the Penny Dreadful concept of with one bound he was free. There's no explanation, Fu comes back. So they're fairly formulaic, but it's the exoticism, the colour, and this wonderful quality of prosaic, everyday London settings with this mad, exotic, oriental stuff going on just behind the scenes. I think that's the key quality to Sax Rohmer. I wouldn't make any claims for it as literature, but it's almost dreamlike. It's certainly magnified and has a kind of music hall pantomime quality that's really quite winning, particularly the early books.
The vividness and intensity of the writing can be explained in part by the way in which Rohmer lived the story as he was writing it, as his widow Elizabeth explained in a 1976 interview.
I once was away for some time, and I'd left a maid to look after him. I did look after Sax. And when I came back, she told me, said, "Oh, madam, I've had a terrible time." I said, "What do you mean you've had a terrible time?" "With Mr. Rohmer." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well," she said, I nearly jumped out of the window." I said, "What happened?" And she told me that he came out of his study with his hands like this and went into the kitchen, and we had a lift in the kitchen from the outside the wall. And said he opened it up and looked out, and his face was a sight, said, and he came up to me and went like that, and he went into the study and lifted the telephone up and spoke into the telephone and put it down again and went back into the study. He said, about 10 minutes later he came out and said, "I'm terribly sorry if I frightened you." Now, I said, "Well, my dear, I can tell you exactly what he was doing." I said, "He's never done it with me because he didn't want to frighten me. But I said, he's been plotting something, a murder. Could it be done? You see what I mean? The time. Very, very odd, but he used to time it all, you see, and I realized what he was doing it for."
There's a stairway back of that ragged curtain. And there's your hunchback. He's taking chosen men upstairs somewhere. That's our objective, Weymouth.
The hunchback at Cadby's notes. There's one of your dacoits. Look at his right hand.
Fu-Manchu is up there. These men come here for their orders. Now rush the stairs when I give the word. You're nearer, so you'll have to go first. If the hunchback follows, I'll take care of him. Ready?
Ready.
Now, up you go. That door at the end of the hall. Hold it, Weymouth. There he is.
By the great old Nick. So you're the notorious Dr. Fu-Manchu.
At your service, Inspector Weymouth, and yours, Mr. Nayland Smith. I have been expecting you. Drop your guns, gentlemen. They are useless. You are covered from several angles.
What have you done with Dr. Petrie?
Dr. Petrie? A worthy companion, Mr. Smith, who comprehends the value of silence. Up to the present, I have been very unsuccessful in my efforts to make him speak. You are just in time, gentlemen, to witness his demise. Draw the curtain, Lau.
Petrie.
Good Lord.
Remain where you are, gentlemen. You cannot help him. And since he is gagged, he cannot speak. You will note that he stands on a trap. When I touch this lever, he will go the way of Mason and Cadby.
Don't touch that lever, Dr. Fu. I'll kill you where you stand. Great Scott! He's pulled the lever. The light, Weymouth, the light!
In the books and radio serials, Fu-Manchu appears comparatively rarely. The continuing theme is the hunt for him by the heroes, but his personality and his influence permeate the narrative.
There's a classic description of Fu-Manchu in the books, and Nayland Smith describes him in the first book in this extraordinary description. Imagine a person tall, lean and feline, with a brow like Shakespeare and a face like Satan.
Imagine a man tall, lean, and feline, high-shouldered, with an expansive brow like Shakespeare, and a face like Satan, a close-shaven skull and long, magnetic eyes of the true cat green. Invest this personality with all the cruel cunning of an Eastern race accumulated in one great intellect, and you have a picture of Dr. Fu-Manchu.
It's dreadful stuff. It is so politically incorrect, but there's a terrible beauty about the way it's overwritten in that way. So on the one hand, he's a sort of pantomime villain, and the words sibilant and guttural are always used to describe the way he speaks. But there's the other side of him, which is the incredible intellect, who is streets ahead of both Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie, the people on his track. And he has to show this off in some way by extracting some very, very rare venom from the poisonous hamadryad in Burma, or by his rather exotic use of rats, or some inventive torture. So he has to display the mad scientist stereotype as well. So his pantomime villain meets mad scientist. And actually, the racial side of it, although talked about a lot by Nayland Smith, isn't particularly strong in the descriptions of Fu-Manchu. I'm never sure in these books how seriously we're meant to take the hero Nayland Smith, because he keeps ranting on about, oh, this is a danger to the white race. And then Dr. Petrie, his sidekick, will say, oh, do be serious, Smith. And you're not quite sure whether he's a bit strange, Smith. He's so over the top in his racial views, and he's fighting this cosmic battle, and then Fu will put him down. There is such a divine simplicity in the English mind, Mr. Smith, and all this. Now, if we take Smith seriously, the books are a kind of racial vituperation. But I prefer to think that, rather like Sherlock Holmes, that Petrie is the identification figure, and he's constantly deflating Smith's wilder flights of fantasies. Do be serious, Smith, and you must be joking whenever Smith talks about the Oriental mind. So it's perhaps a little bit more subtle than people have claimed, but the description of Fu is more musical, more pantomime than racial, I think.
Over the years, the world situation changed. Nayland Smith received a knighthood and rose to be head of the British Secret Service, and Rohmer took up residence in the United States. The Doctor duly transferred his operations there.
I think Sax Rohmer only intended to write 3 Fu-Manchu books, and he wrote them as serials for Castle magazine in 1913, 1914 and 1916. The first one was called The Mystery of Dr. Fu-Manchu, then The Devil Doctor, then The Si-Fan Mysteries. And they're very local. They're about London, East London, particularly Limehouse, and Shenyan's opium den off the Ratcliffe Highway. And it's the theme is really small-time stuff. I mean, Fu, yes, he runs this international organisation, but he does fairly small-time things, and it's in the mists of East London are all these exotic goings-on. Then he takes a rest for about 13 years, and Fu is then revived in the late 20s, early 30s for a series of books, where he's undergone a little bit of a character change, matching Sax Rohmer's lifestyle. I mean, Rohmer had been to America, had been to the French Riviera, had been to Haiti, and had been to Egypt at last. So those become the locations for the stories. It's much more cosmopolitan. Nayland Smith is less racist. He becomes more of a straightforward policeman figure. And the stakes get higher. So the background of President Fu-Manchu and the drums of Fu-Manchu is the rise of the dictatorships in the 1930s. Rudolf Adlon, the dictator of Germany. And compared to him, Fu is beginning to seem quite a nice chap. And he no longer dies at the end of each story, as he did in the first 3. Then he has another rest during the Second World War and comes back in the 50s, by which time he's fighting with Nayland Smith against what he calls the leprosy of communism. So the last book, called Emperor Fu-Manchu, 1959, the year that Rohmer died, set in communist China, with Nayland Smith and Fu-Manchu both out to get Mao Zedong. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Between 1929 and 1931, and again between 1932 and 1933, and finally in 1939 and 1940, Fu-Manchu's adventures were serialized on American radio.
In one way, it's made for, Sax Rohmer stories are made for radio because they a rather mysterious opening. Well, in the radio program, you get a dirge-like theme tune with a bit of blip, 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 bim, 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 boom, tsh, as well, just to show that it has a Chinese theme. And then, out of the fog, someone's kidnapped or Petrie has been captured. So, strong opening and some great sort of exit lines where, you know, Dr. Petrie, I will save you up for one of my more exotic experiments, curtain, that sort of thing. So, structurally, they're made for 15-minute episodes. You don't quite get the Britishness, I don't think. I mean, the accents wobble a little bit. Smith seems to be fairly good, but the rest, particularly the Cockney landladies and things, leave a great deal to desire. And Fu, in a funny way, lacks charisma. Now, whether it's because it's not visual, this voice, they put him in an unusual setting, in a tapestry-hung room in High Street, as if he's living in a manor house, almost, rather than underground in Limehouse. And Baker Street for the goodies, and Manor House in High Street for the baddies. And somehow that slightly lacks the exoticism. Interestingly, although it's made in 1940, it's not one of the 1940s or 30s stories. It's the original book, The Mystery of Fu-Manchu, called The Insidious Fu-Manchu in the States, and in the radio version, The Shadow of Fu-Manchu, same story. So it's become nostalgic by 1940. And although all the stories are set in the present, in novel form, in the radio program, you get a sense of Gaslight and Sherlock Holmes-type nostalgia. So it's doing something slightly different to the books. It's a nostalgic Britain, nostalgic East End, nostalgic Limehouse and Wapping for American audiences. They creak a bit, but they're interesting to hear. They are very close to Sherlock Holmes, though, and I suspect that was the competition on the radio.
The world has moved on from the Edwardian England that gave birth to Fu-Manchu. But the combination of melodrama, suspense and exoticism retains a certain potency even now, particularly for the imagination liberated by the magic of radio.
Oh, we're in the thick of it again, eh?
We're always in the thick of it, Petrie. Our danger's no greater in Norfolk than in London. Oh, if you're not too tired, stop in my room a bit. We'll smoke. I feel like talking.
Glad to.
Leave the light off. Come sit by the window. Elton, the dog's restless tonight. I feel that something's about to happen. By Jove, what do they want with Elton?
He is a mystery, old chap. That man in the train with the case of instruments. The apparition of the green eyes tonight. Can they have been the eyes of Fu-Manchu, Nayland?
No one else, Petrie. Some peculiarly unique outrage is being contemplated. You can wager on that. Something calling for the presence of the master.
But do you suppose he's trying to prevent Eltham's leaving for the Orient without killing him?
Quite possible. He probably has instructions to be merciful. And heaven help the victim of Oriental mercy. That dog. You notice the difference in the tone of his barking? Savage anger. There's something... He's broken loose from his moorings, Petrie. Look, tearing across the lawn toward the shrubbery. Get your gun, man. That dog's on the scent of something. Come on, the dog has freed someone.
The programme was compiled and presented by Professor Jeffrey Richards and produced by Liz Anstey. Next week, Jeffrey Richards compares the wireless Tarzan with his very different cinematic incarnations.